I was just going to give a PSA to your users.
Oh, you got cold open material?
If they do not have a NAS set up at home,
yeah.
If they do not store every piece of digital data they've ever produced,
oh no.
If they do not know where their pictures from their phone from 2008 and 2009 are, it's okay. That's normal. You guys are freaks. I appreciate it, but no.
Guests are entitled to their own opinions.
Wow. This is not an official. Tech Pod statement. I feel really attacked right now, Brad. I don't know about you.
I just let it roll off my back at this point.
Okay.
I know what I like.
I've never gone back and looked for an image from pre-2010, what people in my life looked like before the iPhone. I kind of remember. I like to remember in my head. That's good enough.
I ripped a whole bunch of old home movies off of VHS last week. And well, because it's fun to my kid is she doesn't believe what the world used to be like. And I can show her a time where everybody just wasn't walking around with hunched over looking at a little glowy screen in their hand.
Do you want to hear a clip of me at 7 years old getting extremely excited to open Soundwave on Christmas Day? Because I can give you that now in pretty extreme Southern drawl also.
Oh, wow. Wow. Brad wins. Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad.
Brad, I'm really excited about our guest today, not just because I work with him every day and take, a modicum of abuse from the world's laziest blogger / game developer / studio head / Twitch streamer. But yeah, we're here today with my boss at my day job, Chet Faliszek, who is he's done a lot of stuff. He was he was the lead writer and the lead at Valve on Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2. He wrote the Portal 2 co-op and a lot of Portal 2 stuff. He worked on different episodes of Half-Life 2. And TF2, all sorts of stuff over the years while he was at Valve. But yeah, Chet Faliszek's here, and we're going to talk to him today about making the game that I work on, the Anacrusis. Today, everybody, we're here with my worlds are colliding. It's I got Brad on one side and Chet on the other. It's the two most important men in my life, it turns out.
The yin and yang of Will's professional career.
Yeah, exactly. But our guest today is Chet Faliszek, who is my boss at Stray Bombay, the founder of the studio. And we're actually recording this. I didn't realize this when we set the recording date for this, but this is actually the first anniversary of the early access launch of the Anacrusis. And we'd been talking for a while about getting Chet to come on and talk about the game, because people ask about the game a lot in comments and questions and stuff like that. And what better way to have a frank and kind of open conversation about making games in here in 2022, 2023, than for the three of us to sit down and talk about it and kind of run through what it's like to make a game, make an indie game, as a small studio in this the late days of Steam and Xbox and all that. So welcome, Chet, to the show. Hello.
Oh, thank you for having me. Yeah, no, it's I listen like I was saying, I listen every Sunday, and so this is weird for me. There's the official Will during the week, and then there's the unofficial Will on Sunday mornings as I go for a walk.
It makes me so nervous every time I'm reminded that you listen to the show, because you're Chet, you've done actual real stuff before. I'm just some dipshit podcast.
Oh my God!
Oh no.
That's a myth we could kick down right away.
Important people are listening to the show.
But yeah, so for folks who don't know, at Stray Bombay, we released a game called the Anacrusis last January. We launched it in early access on Steam. We launched it in game preview on the Xbox and the Microsoft Store. And it's a 4-player co-op, kind of Left 4 Dead like You play as 4 survivors stuck on a crumbling spaceship fighting hordes of aliens who have inexplicably come out of nowhere. And like the idea behind the game, the thing when Chet called me, was like, hey, do you want to come? You should come play this thing. And then asked me if I wanted to come work there. Was, hey, we're making a game that is about having fun and hanging out. And that's what I do. That's what I like, games that I can play with my friends and hang out with my friends and goof around, and they're kind of sandboxes for that kind of environment. So I said sure, and I've been there for a year and a half now, a little bit more than that even. But yeah, I'm kind of curious, Chet. I mean, I'm actually, Brad, you should drive this because I'm on both sides of the fence here.
You're in a position to both ask and answer the same questions, I guess. So
what are both our greatest strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah.
It's my intense honesty, Will.
Why are you so good at your job? It's
you recapped that beautifully, Will. Nicely done.
So
thank you.
I feel like the conversation that's about to happen is kind of an embarrassment of riches for me, because there are so many things I would love to ask about, and probably will, from back-end tools on these different platforms to like business deals around Game Pass to the state of various engines and middleware. But anyway, yeah, I got really excited when I looked at the Steam page right before this, like literally 20 minutes ago, and said, oh my God, it's a year to the day that we're recording this since you guys launched in early access. So like the obvious question to start, but also to mark this occasion, like, where do things stand today? How are you guys feeling a year in? You know, you're still technically in early access, so you're still iterating on the game. Kind of what's the state of the union here?
So still not finished. I mean, it's kind of game you'll never be finished in, but it finally, I think, is at the place where it's the game we wanted to release. Little rough start there on the early access launches. I think you kind of want to get that feedback, but we always knew, you know, when you make a first person shooter, it's a really broad world you're working in, right? And there's this like want to be competitive or want to be like really hard and difficult. And there's this fine line where our game is more just like, hey, it's intense, it's fun, but it's not hard. There's modes you can play that are hard, but you want to have it be where you're hanging out with your friends and you're having a good time and you're having this shared experience together. And it's a little bit funny and it's a little bit goofy. And now that the workshops really come online and people have started making some really outlandish mods and goofy stuff, like I feel like people look at the game now and they understand what it is. Oh, this isn't some hardcore space shooter. This isn't some horror game. This is this funny kind of goofy game that I just hang out with my friends. And so it's reacted, and the community's reacted that way with it. They understand now. Like our reviews were very positive and like all of that. So it's just like we're just in a really good spot now. So it's like it's fun now, where the reviews match the expectations, which match what we originally designed and what we were going for. And it just took a while to get there. So yeah, this is like the first time it's just like, okay, now this is really hitting it, and this is really going well.
It's the early access thing is tough, right? Because like when you release a game early, when you're doing this, you want to do it early enough that you can actually make changes. Like there's 2 ways to do early access, right? You can either say, okay, here's our roadmap and we're going to do this over this period of time and we're going to put it out now because we want maybe a little bit of feedback, but probably we also ran out of money. The other way is to do, and the things that I think of as like the great early access titles are hey, we came out and we put the game out and the community behind the game was like, hey, there's stuff here that we don't like. And it's maybe even core parts of the design. And we came into this with the open idea that like we were willing, like our core pillars should be fun to play with friends. You should always be able to play with somebody, regardless of how much they've played. We shouldn't let the game get in the way of you having fun. And the community, the game needs to foster inclusion and people working together and not create a bunch of like busy work for players. There's a couple others that I almost certainly forgot there. So Chet will, I'm sure, remind me. But like outside of that stuff, everything's on the table, right? Like we're not going to change aliens to zombies or something like that because it's an alien game. It's a science fiction game. But like, we wanted to be able to make changes when we launched. And we've made some pretty kind of enormous changes since then, but also it's just continuing to work on the core.
Yeah. But it's also interesting because of early access, it's the expectations of what needs to be finished and what doesn't need to be finished. So I'd never done early access storytelling before. And I mean, traditionally, like in the Left 4 Dead's, as the project lead in Left 4 Dead and writer on the Left 4 Dead series, they're done, right? We're done. Here's the story, go at it. We're here. I'm like, okay, we want a first pass on it, but how much do we need for people to have a first pass on it? Now it's hey, we want more story in here. Why isn't there more story in here? And I'm like, well, because that's comes later. A lot of that comes from when the game is quote unquote finished and I play the game and then I write to what's there versus making guesses of what's going to be there.
Have you gotten much grief from any players that it's not quote unquote done? Like, does it rile people to see that it's still in early access a year later? I mean, does anybody care?
I mean, anybody on the internet get mad about something? Yes, that happened.
Okay, next question.
But the community that actually plays the game, I think, gets it. They get how reactive we've been in listening, or at least, we'll explain to them, hey, maybe you're not going to get that, but here's why. Right. So yeah. I'm now 2 decades on the conversation that you should never have a creature in your game incap you where you can't rescue yourself. Right. We had that in Left 4 Dead. We have that in here. The reason you have that is so someone can't just run off and leave everybody behind. If you don't have that, someone will run off and leave everybody behind. So now, are there going to be people in the community that say, hey, I don't like that mechanic? Yes, those are the lone wolves. That will always exist, right? So I will give them an explanation why, and we'll do some of that kind. So sure, there's some things like that, or people really want versus mode, but we first wanted to get co-op mode nailed down and then bring versus to it. So sure, there's people who want things sooner than later, or they want something different. But I think especially if they're in our Discord where we're having a different kind of communication with them and a different kind of level of discourse, the conversation that happens around there are really helpful. And often it's like, what I really want to know is why you're saying the thing you're saying. What don't you like? Oh, the bots didn't save you when that happened and you like to play solo with bots. Okay. That's a bug we can fix, and versus hey, we're going to break this core design pillar.
The other thing on a larger scale, not to pit platforms against platforms, but early access is really well established on Steam and people understand it. And Steam promotes early access a little bit differently than they do fully released titles, which actually I think is probably a good thing. It's a little bit challenging for early access titles, but it means we don't get you don't get a big broad push on Steam. It's hard to get a good big broad push on Steam as an early access title. On Xbox, the game preview side is a little bit newer, and I don't think the audience is quite as familiar with it. So there are a lot of people over there like, hey, this game is broken and janky. I can't believe they put this on the store. And that's that is a thing. If you're making a game, you should probably, and you're thinking about game preview versus early access, whatever, it's something to be aware of.
Sure.
Yeah. When we released last year, this time, we were on the front page of Xbox. I was like, hey, this is the hot new thing. Play it. Not, hey, this is an early access title. Go in with that. But to be fair, also Xbox has xCloud, which works amazingly well. Mm-hmm. And so you had a lot of people who could just try it without even downloading it and just jump in, which is good, but also bad, because when you have that little friction going in, how you approach the game and how you stick with the game is different. And so what we learned over time was we need to build in a game that stays sticky to those people who just want to just jump in. And our bounce rate those early days were super high because of that, because we just didn't, we thought you bought the game, you're going to try it for a little bit, you're going to play it for a little bit. And so now, we changed that, and then that became very sticky for us, where those players would come in and they would stay.
Yeah, it kind of makes xCloud, and that the bounce rate is when people leave. It's the period of time, the percentage of people that leave in a certain period of time, and like Chet said, our number was high. It meant that we had to approach the first, and it actually ended up being a good thing for all players, because it meant that we had to get really good with our onboarding. Right, we had to teach people how to play the game in a really quick and clear and precise way, so that more of those people would be willing to hang out and keep at the game, which like I said, benefits everybody.
Yeah. So you launched into Game Pass and for sale on the same day. So you were on Steam for money, you were on Xbox, you were selling on Xbox at the same time you were on Game Pass, right? But you were on Game. So how did the Game Pass launch go? What was the interplay between people paying money versus?
So I'll just say, when we originally signed the contract many years ago, Game Pass on the PC was not a thing, really. It was a very small thing. When we launched, Game Pass on the PC was a very big thing. They, in fact, were giving out free 3 months during our period. So we saw gigantic numbers. That was nice. But those gigantic numbers were a lot of looky-loos that were bouncing. And obviously, if we had made this thing that just grabbed hold of you at the very second you started playing it, it was amazing, it would have been looky-loos. That's our fault. But it was just a lot more traffic incoming than our little early access title was ready for. And that's like, I really wish we could redo that now and have this game, because this game could hold up and they would enjoy it and they would dig in on it. And so that was a little hard. And then we had some stumbles around, we're small studios, so we outsource some parts of it, like the Q&A and localization, and definitely the Q&A around WinGDK and DX12. WinGDK is the PC version of the Windows Store thing, and DX12 was not a good combination. Did not get a lot of testing, and it showed. And so that was kind of upsetting that we thought we had at least knew we were stable and had that covered. And then we had those players coming in and being like, hey, this thing crashes or this happens, and we jumped on it and we fixed those issues. But still, that out of the gate kind of experience was eye opening.
Is it safe to assume, you talk about the Game Pass contract being signed years ago and then circumstances on the ground changed in the interim? Safe to assume none of that is reflected in the business arrangement unless you go renegotiate the contract in terms of like, PC version is way bigger now. That doesn't matter to the business people, right?
No. And it's still the whole idea of why we liked Game Pass early on. And this still rang true, as while we were getting our feet under us of finding what the game was, we thought Game Pass would bring us this set of players that would come in with low friction and try the game and be able to then support and be part of the community and help us grow the people who actually purchased the game, right? And I think that's still mainly true. I think we would have just approached it a little bit differently and probably held back a little bit more if we had known kind of some of that stuff. I still think Game Pass is an amazing deal. xCloud works amazingly well. The people at Microsoft were super supportive. It just that was just way bigger than we had realized at that time.
Okay. So do you think that was the deal still worth it in your mind ultimately?
Depends what day you ask me. I think if I think about anything in the past long enough, I have regret about it, which maybe is why I get rid of all my stuff.
There might be something to that.
I think overall it helped us, and it helped us think about our players, and it helped drive a lot of like, oh, we've got to fix this right away because we have this big group of people playing and they're being very vocal about this and they're giving us feedback. I think that way it helped us. I think I would have maybe approached some elements of it differently, or I'd want to go in to it differently knowing that now. But still, I think overall it was in theory the right way to think about it. Just some of the execution of it was,
I think, doing it over again, knowing how our infrastructure held up in retrospect, I think I probably would have staggered the launch and done a Steam. Like if it was possible from a contractual sense, I would have staggered and launched on Steam and given us a month to fix like backend issues and network performance and stuff like that. So that when that big Game Pass crush hits, then we would have been better able to weather that. But I mean, sometimes that's not possible.
Is that more, like you say, for technical reasons? I mean, is there any concern about, Game Pass downloads cannibalizing potential sales and that sort of thing?
Well, I mean, that's always the fear, right?
Yeah. I don't know if you want to talk about it or not.
Well, I think the people who buy Game Pass are probably your hardcore players, right? Think about it. If you play a lot of games, Game Pass is such a deal, there's no way you're not going to buy it, right? There's that mythical person who buys one game a year. I don't know how you market to them. I know how people who play more than one game a year. And then you're probably on Game Pass. And so you are probably looking at an early access title and going, I don't know if this is ready yet. I don't know if I'm ready to commit. But once it is, then we can just see in our Discord, we can hear people like, hey, I got this on Game Pass and now I bought it. Yeah. We saw a lot of those conversions. So it's on the team, it's on the game. Now, if you were making a single player game that was 2 hours long and you only played once, that's a dicey situation. But for a game like ours that you go back to and you play again and again, and it continuously gets new content added to it, I think it's the job of the developer. It's our job, right? It's to win them over. And so then it becomes, that's got to be our concentration of making sure we're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, in our case, it was a year. I think everybody has different deals, but it gave us a year to engage this large group of people that we normally wouldn't have access to. So yeah, I think I would do it again. Absolutely.
Was the game in a position to further monetize players on day one? I can't remember. Were there any hooks for microtransactions?
Shortly afterwards, we did an experiment on the Xbox side of we have a Game Pass that's really about engagement more than monetization. We also offer that outside of the normal Game Pass version of the game. It was on like a $7 upgrade, I think. But really, it quickly became clear like that's not the right approach. Really, for us, the right approach is still using that for engagement. I like to play a lot of games. I play Battlefield 5 still sometimes, and I'll play it just because they give me a weekly set of challenges to complete. And I'm stupid enough that I just want to complete these challenges and I earn something that I never cash in. I've never cashed in one single thing I've earned in Battlefield 5, but I've earned a bunch of them. I enjoy that part of the loop. Maybe I'm alone on that or stupid, but I think a lot of people like that engagement. And so I really like the Battle Pass as that way of engagement. And that's how it is on Steam. That's how it is going forward. It's free. It just really gives you little challenges to do. And then you unlock some stuff like dances and cosmetics.
Yeah, talking about a season pass, not like a Game Pass specific thing. And yeah, Microsoft actively encouraged us to do monetization inside the game. It turns out building battle passes is fairly time consuming and expensive when you're a studio of like 15 or 20 people.
So not to talk about Game Pass business stuff incessantly, although that's something that industry pundits I think speculate about a lot. I know you said your deal was like years in the past when you signed the contract and everything, but like I'm just kind of curious what that picture looks like when you go to the table with them. I mean, are there standard terms that they offer developers these days, or is everybody's deal completely bespoke?
I have no idea anymore.
Okay.
we were kind of, again, the early of the starting to think about the PC side of it and really leaning into Game Pass. And so I think back then I had talked to other people who were on it and their deals were different than our deals. I'm sure 2.5 or 3 years later, the deals are different now, right? I think it's become way more mature. And I think publishers and developers have a lot better sense of what they're entering into, especially after this year. I think this was a year of learning. This was the kind of the year Game Pass really took off. So I imagine that they're all different, right? I mean, they're all different from what we signed. Maybe they're standardized, maybe not. I don't know.
I'm curious about, the ins and outs of running the studio. We don't have to get into your budgets and cash flow and all that stuff too much, but like just as an example that comes to mind, and I want to make sure I've got the details right. Did the game launch with only dedicated server support? Could you play peer-to-peer at launch, or was it purely you guys running servers?
We were running servers at launch. Okay. We are now peer-to-peer.
Right. So I knew that talking to Will. And so I was wondering like what the burn rate was like, or like if that's a lot of overhead, just as an example.
Hey, like, that's a lot of overhead. Yeah. Okay. Dedicated servers. But the bigger problem that I don't think we, so first of all, there's two weird things of making a game with a senior team. One, you're often solving for past mistakes, not current mistakes. And that's a trap you fall into all the time. You could tell yourself that and you still fall into that trap all the time. And then the other is just making sure that you're stepping back and understanding of like what the implications are at our size. So for instance, dedicated servers, we could afford 2 co-locations on AWS, right? AWS isn't like, hey, servers everywhere. It's this weird billing where it's really fractionalized in each area. It's super complicated and a mess. I've said that to them directly. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But so what happened though is then all of a sudden what it means is if we're not, let's say in Australia, because we're not, Australian players are having this really bad experience because they're connecting to West Coast servers and it's just not a good experience where if we would have done peer-to-peer, they could have just connected locally and had a way better experience. Some days you guys could do a show on what napping looks like in Australia. It's a nightmare. It's a mess. The major ISPs, at least 10 years ago, didn't talk to each other. I don't know what they're doing now. But it's just like a mess. So the realization was that peer-to-peer would actually be a better experience for almost everybody. And still wanting, though, to have that matchmaking, still wanting to have, like, I don't want to put people to a server browser. Like, that feels very 2004 or something. But so how do you do all these things and have peer-to-peer? And that's something, we've been working on and expanding out. And so we moved off of dedicated servers in September. And I think it's been a constant series of updates since then to improve what that experience looks like. But it ends up that users today have a better experience because we're not on a dedicated server than if we were, which is super backwards in my head from I'm used to, hey, for Left 4 Dead, we just spin up servers around the world everywhere because Valve has a super crazy network of servers they can spin up, right? So the other thing that the peer-to-peer allows us to do is we already had modders working, but originally our first set of modders, how's this for terrifying? We just gave them perforce access because we had
all the code in the game. Just to be clear, all the code and all the hard assets for the game. They had the whole thing.
They had our entire source control because it was the only way that we could get them to be able to test was to be on our servers and be testing that way, which is terrifying, even for a small studio. But we're like, okay, we're a small studio. We can do this. And they're people I kind of knew. So we just gave them full access, but they could only test by if we included it in our build. And that's just not a good way for modders to be able to test. So we wanted them to be able to test. And we'd always had this plan to offer peer-to-peer on the side. And it just really came to the forefront. And now that it is the default way to play, you can see modders are able to test and they're able to do private betas and they can have other people testing their stuff. And it's just a really better interaction for everybody.
You probably knew I was going to get around to Steam at some point. I mean, you've got a long history with Valve. First of all, how long has it been since you were there?
I don't know, a while. I was there for 12 years. I started in 2004, so I left in 2016.
Yeah. So has working with Steam, has working with Steam changed like between being on the inside and being on the outside, and also just in the time that's elapsed since you left? Like, was it kind of very familiar coming back to working with? I mean, I'm the kind of nerd who like is more interested in the back end tools about how you like upload builds.
Brad has literally asked me if I'll screen share the back end tools.
Dude, like somebody wants to give me a job just like programming like promotional units on a storefront. I would be super into it.
Don't, the monkey's paw just curled on that one, man. Don't
like, and part of that is like I've worked at websites over the years that also have bespoke hand built back ends with their own weird idiosyncrasies and stuff. So like I'm super curious about like game distribution backends, like storefront backends, all that stuff. Like,
so first, if you are a developer and you are only shipping, let's say on PlayStation, still sign up for Steam and say you're shipping on Steam, because the tools that it affords you as a developer are the best in the world by far. So we could push up and build there, distribute it as a private beta to a group of people and get feedback on it. Like the backend
in like tools, a couple of hours.
Yeah,
just to be clear.
Yeah, it's like instantaneous. As soon as the build's done, there's no cert, there's no anything. And that ability to do that kind of stuff is just insanely great. And so those tools are great. Some of the tools I just was really not familiar with that side of it, but I understood them all well, right? And actually working with Valve, I mean, I still have a bunch of friends over there. Our account rep is a really good friend, Gus, who when we were promoting VR, her and I worked together on, I was the public facing part of it. But if you ever wondered how things got organized and set, and we did all the events around places and set it up, it was all Gus. It was all her work.
Chet never answered an email in his life.
We played softball together. She actually, I was the pitcher and she caught. Like, she's a really good friend. She's really great. I ate mushroom, banana, and shrimp pizza with her in Sweden. So like, working with her is just great, right? Like it's super great, and we have a good conversation about stuff. But it's also Steam, and there's a bunch of stuff that's just like, hey, you're an early access title, you don't get this, or you get this, right? And so they're fair that way. It's not like we just get a bunch of free stuff because it's me. But yeah, it's been great.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always weird just to clear. Like, I left Steam on totally friendly terms. It was me leaving. I was just like, hey, I love it here, but I want to go back to making games, and I want to go back to making a certain kind of game we're not going to be making here. So, hey, thanks.
And then, I feel like Valve is a little more anything goes. I don't know if maybe it's a little dicier to dig into the console backends. First of all, forgive me. Did you guys end up shipping later on PlayStation or no?
No.
Still just Xbox. Okay.
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about the Xbox experience as a developer.
So just as a history of doing this I think every developer probably wished they could ship cross-platform play back in the day between like Xbox and PC, like when we did the Left 4 Deads. But you couldn't, because Microsoft had this long, laborious certification process for every update. And that meant weeks. And you just can't wait it's a really hard way to work where you have to submit something, sit on it for 2 weeks, and then go. They are great now. The reason why you're seeing so much cross-platform stuff is we submit it the night before, the next day it's ready. And that ability to do that and that kind of turnaround has let us just be able to update and keep the two versions in sync. Because it used to be you didn't want to do cross-platform because that meant you were actually harming one of the platforms because you were making choices or you were doing delays because of the one platform. That doesn't exist anymore. Microsoft has been absolutely great about that. And they also have private beta testings as well and everything else like that Steam has. It's just there's always a little bit of a delay in it versus the instantaneousness of Steam. And that's the only reason why. But Microsoft has really gotten their tools head and shoulders above what they used to be and really great.
I was going to say the crossplay thing is the other. We talked about dedicated servers a minute ago, but the crossplay is the other part of why dedicated servers, why we had to do dedicated servers at launch, is because I don't think anybody was like the backend provider we use, Excelbyte, and the other I don't think any of their competitors had a P2P host, listen server based crossplay solution last October when we would have needed to implement it, or June, whatever. Yeah. Or October of 2021, not October of 2022.
Sure. And then financially, as a developer working on Xbox, I mean, this information is 10, 15 years old, so I'm sure it's changed dramatically. But like back in the day, you would hear stories about smaller developers on Xbox, like XBLA titles. I think what I heard was like your first patch was free, but then subsequent patches, there were like 5-figure certification fees attached to various things. Like,
God, we would be super, not just broke, super broke. If
we're at 28 updates.
28 updates last year
for the rapid iteration that you're doing. So are those roadblocks just kind of a thing in the past?
Those are gone. Yeah. So just to be clear, since last year we've done 28 updates, and all of those on both platforms. So that would have sunk us again. I think how they running that side of it and thinking about the future is just way better than it used to be, and it's really helpful.
Yeah. So people understand. There's like Microsoft has. I think we can talk about this. They have big certs and little certs.
Okay.
Like the launch cert, the one before your game goes out on sale, they look at everything from like how the game works. People load it up and go through it. They test it in the way that you think of a cert. They also do things like look at your descriptions in the store and your screenshots and your videos and your ratings and all the 70 million territories that they have ratings. And they look at your certificates for the ESRB and all that stuff. And like, they tick all the boxes and they look at that. Then after you do a few of those and you do them well, then they say, okay, you're trustworthy. We're going to put you in the fast one. And that's a lighter touch. So they don't look at all the store stuff and they don't look at all, they look at what changes and they look at the builds, but they don't dig super deep until you make a mistake. And then you get yeeted back out into the slow tree again, which hasn't happened to us, thankfully.
As far as engine tech goes, you guys are on Unreal 4, correct?
Correct. Unreal 4.27. And then one of the things we did that I think helped us a lot was you weren't allowed to make engine changes, right? Because a classic thing in small developers is you make a bunch of bespoke engine changes, and then every time there's a new update, you have this month of integration and all of that goes on. I think we made some very minor changes, and our editor itself is changed. So we have our own version of the Unreal editor that we edited so that we can do our thing. But we were very careful about not making these big changes to Unreal itself. We just were like, hey, if this is the way it is, we got to figure out how to work with it. Because trying to do the integration of all those changes, because with Unreal, you get the source code. You could change anything you want. It's just, you're going to have to live with integrating all the updates then after that.
Where do things stand with Unreal 4 support at this point? I mean, Epic is like pretty visibly full speed ahead with moving to Unreal 5 at this point. Like, I mean, there are so many licensees. I have to assume like they're not exactly dropping the ball.
No, they said
4 yet, but
they said 4.27 would be the last update. And they did another update after that. They just didn't give it a number or something. I don't know. It's weird. So it's really nice and stable. It's really great. Right. And we're also looking at 5 as well, which is fun. Does some different things, but like that, the Anacrusis will stay at 4.27 forever. But they've changed, they've updated some stuff, as well as they've updated some of the stuff around it, which is like their EOS, which is their Epic Online systems and like other things. So it's just not all the core game itself, right? So, but yeah.
Well, and the nice thing about using the stock the stock thing is that when NVIDIA or Intel or AMD release a plugin for, DLSS or FSR or whatever crazy new technology the graphics people come up with, we just slot it in and it works, which is it makes a lot of that stuff a lot easier. Yeah. So.
Are there any? I assume the answer to this question is no. Putting on my amateur game developer hat, but there are basically no circumstances where you would ever rebase a game like this on, say, the next Unreal, right? I feel like there is a perception out there among some kind of hardcore gamers. It's like, oh, you should move up to the next engine. That's got way better graphics. Why wouldn't you do that? But that is completely ludicrous, correct?
For this game, no, we wouldn't do that. But let's say if we were doing an open world game, and I think 5 does some of that stuff better, there may be a inkling, but really for the most part you don't see people do that. The only people who ever change their engines and upgrade it are the people who actually make the engines themselves,
right?
Because otherwise it's just a lot of overhead, and you've built all of this tools, you've built all of this content for this version, and to have to sit there and go back through it, I don't think there's just a lot of value to it. And also 4.27 does everything we need. So
Chet, the right answer there is if somebody wrote us a really large check, we would love to do that work.
Is there anything you want to say about the studio's dabbling with UE5 so far? In terms of just fun stuff, we're not seeing a lot of shipping games yet. So I think people are still hungry to just hear hey, what can this thing do?
I think so. It's always just, I think you always need to check a little bit. And so over winter break, I was playing around some with 5 and just, it's really easy to make something really big and beautiful that is just oh my God, this would have been a E3 demo, 5 years ago. And would have blown everybody away. So it's just fun to see how much that's increasing, and all the character stuff as well is crazy. I think everyone can play with the character stuff. I don't know if you need to be a dev. I don't know, but it's
the metahuman stuff is all just out. You can just download it.
Yeah, it's just crazy of how much this is going forward, and just watch it. It's just not us, but just I think if you look at just indie games today. So many indie games using either Unity or Unreal, but the latest versions of them are just oh my God, these would have been AAA titles in 2008 or 2012, which I guess sounds old now, but to me in my game years, they don't, because they're not 90s. But it's still just crazy if the tools just keep getting better and better and better. So sure, there's some jealousy of oh, I wish we had this, but we're fine.
If people are curious, they should spend a little time looking at Fortnite. Fortnite, the last Fortnite update when they moved to 5.1 is the stake in the ground for when the last generation ended and the next generation starts from where I sit.
Yeah, that's kind of been my feeling too. I mean, you're still seeing UE4 games shipping, Callisto Protocol, I believe, is UE4, but it's got, for example, a bunch of ray tracing stuff in it that I assume they did all themselves, kind of to your point about taking the engine off the shelf and then modifying the hell out of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the engine it's. One of the things I didn't understand until I started working here is, I mean, I did, but I guess I did. I don't know if I did or not, but the game engine and the game, at the end of the day, the engine's just a tool, right? It's a fancy shovel, and it depends on it's the people that you dig and what you do with the dirt that matters, not the shovel. Once you have the pile made, the dirt's done, the shovel's work is done. This is a terrible metaphor.
You really taking this metaphor.
I was like, I thought I had a good one there, and then I was like, I'm going to lean into this, and it just kept getting worse and worse.
We're picking it up. Let's see. So you Chet touched on this. I was going to ask, but I think you kind of answered the question already. Are there even credible alternatives to Unreal and Unity for developers at your scale these days, or are those basically the two?
Those are the two. Two. I mean, I know some crazy people license the source engine, but they modify the living hell out of it. That source engine 2 is fine. But that's really it. I think a lot of people talk about Godot, and if you're talking the super indie people making some smaller games, you may want to play in that space, or at least look at that as well. Or Game Maker is another one if you're making some kind of 2D thing. But if you're making a full-on 3D game, you're looking at Unity or Unreal, I think.
I mean, it's the question with a small studio is always, I mean, with any studio really, is you're turning money into time, right? Yeah. So whichever one lets you turn the most money into the least time that makes the most content is the winner.
Is anybody Like, I grew up, I cut my teeth in the kind of early, like the Doom Quake era. Like everybody was just doing their own thing. Is anybody just doing their own tech from the ground up these days outside? Obviously, there are giant studios like, the big publisher teams that have their own in-house engines across the whole company. But like in the smaller indie space, like there are no Quake engines these days, right? That are just fully clean sheet of paper.
Well, I mean, there's people doing their own bespoke stuff like Teardown.
Sure, okay,
definitely did their own, right? And they could not have made that game without doing their own. That was the shoot, we should call Teardown. It's just a tech demo for their engine, man. No, sorry, but right, like that's a good example, I think, of making something that really leaned into what the underlying tech was.
Well, and Brendan Chung uses id Tech, old. Like there's a fair amount of indie stuff built on old open source id Tech stuff at this point. That's like pretty bananas, right? Like a wide range in quality and style.
Someone on our Discord linked the Blendo Games GitHub repo this very morning that I should have known that existed, but didn't. I mean, do you guys have a lot of open source stuff going on? Like that's something that I feel like we don't see as much of in games as we could. I mean, Godot, I believe, is open source, right?
Godot's open source, I believe.
Yeah, I don't think really we have a lot. And then the stuff that we build out is stuff that is somebody's licensed tendrils inside of it in so many different ways. Like we were talking about wanting to give access to our character models to the modders, and ends up we can't give them the heads because of the licensing deal for the heads. Yeah, I know. Exactly right. The modern world. Well, we give them the bodies. The bodies we made, they're ours.
Okay, sure.
And you don't really need the heads. You can just stick stuff on the heads.
There's stuff that I wish we could or could open or at least make available. Like I think the thing that we use to build the nav mesh is a really neat piece of tech that is useful. Like that is broadly useful and applicable, but also I don't want to take on the overhead of supporting it and maintaining it.
Just to be clear, it doesn't build a nav mesh. We use the Unreal nav mesh. What it does is interpret the nav mesh and the space. So it does this really cool thing. Our AI director, which is our technical piece that kind of populates the levels as well as make the game dynamic, right? So you have the intensity flow. It analyzes the entire map ahead of time. And this means modders as well can just put this in and you'll get hints that say, go this way, even on a modded map that, it has no markup on it. It just the piece of technology kind of analyzes everything and figures out what the golden path is through that.
It'll spawn enemies. It'll spawn drops. It does all that stuff without the modders having to place anything.
Yeah, like speaking of the kind of unique tech that you've developed for the game, like has anything come online in the year since early access started? Like the game director stuff obviously was like there at least in a nascent form on day one, but like have there been massive under the hood changes or any like clever new tech that has emerged once people were playing it?
Well, so the game director, again, which is that central piece that's controlling everything, that got a lot of updates where we want to make sure that the intensity isn't overwhelming, right? So there was a point where at release, we only had one flavor of intensity. And that was you could play maybe 1-2 games and you were kind of exhausted because you're always at the edge of your seats. One of our playtesters said, we made it through. We barely made it through, but a lesser group wouldn't. They were actually really bad players. But that was like that kind of stuck with us as like a good line of how people should feel when they played. But the problem is that's almost too tense to have conversations with sometimes, or it was just like too edge of your seat. So now we've made that intense mode so you can still have that flavor, but we work to make a lesser version of it because it's really hard to do hey, we're not going to keep you at the edge of your seat, but we're going to still keep you engaged and what that looks like.
It turns out it's really easy to kill everyone. And it's really easy to give everybody no challenge at all. It's the hard part is giving them the kind of ebb and flow of like making them feel like they're right on the cusp of losing, and then pull back from that without it feeling like it's cooked. And
so we kind of work through that one live, and then while we always had the game instructor behind the scenes doing a little bit of stuff. When the stuff we mentioned about that first 15 minutes, it really came to the forefront. The idea of the game instructor is if you've never done something, tell me what to do. And then once I do it a couple times, fade away because, hey, I know how to do it. So if I've never healed somebody and somebody's injured, it's going to say, hey, take out your health pack. Once you take out your health pack, it's gonna be like, go buy that person. You go buy that person, so be like, right click on them, and now you can heal them. And having kind of that tutorial in the flow versus tutorial levels was important. And we did a lot of work to really bring that all the way through. And I think that's one of the reasons that really helped the bounce rate of like, there's nothing worse than starting a game and being like, I have no idea what to do. Or even worse is probably doing that, 30-minute tutorial while your friends are waiting to play the co-op game. And then you get out of it and you don't remember anything that actually you learned in that tutorial and you're just as lost. And so we wanted to have that be part of the flow.
That's one of the things Chet, before I started a Discord before we didn't even announce the game, it started a Discord for the studio, and just invited people who liked playing co-op games and liked playing weird mods and kind of, brought all these people together and started playing a bunch of co-op games. And as a result, like we avoided a lot of the pitfalls of playing games with your friends hard. Like, we have friend codes, so you can play with somebody who's not on your friends list. We have the game instructor, so that you can learn, so that when you're like, hey, you should come try this game, they don't have to go do an hour of work in a long tutorial mission before they can jump in and play the game with you that you invited them to come play. And there's a million little things like that like you learn just by playing a buttload of games.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, do you formally block out time as a studio to play other games as kind of research? And is anything in particular you've learned from any specific games? So that really stands out. We kind of, Friday afternoons we're going to, in fact, when we're done with this, we're going to play some games today. But I think to Will's point, it's even more valuable. The smartest thing I've done in this entire studio is starting that Discord and just jumping in and playing co-op games. Because boy, when something doesn't work, when, hey, if somebody can just run ahead and gobble up the stuff and you're behind them and you play that game once or twice, you're like, I never want to play that game again. And here's the reason why. Okay, we should never have that in our game. That kind of experience with just random people playing like real people is always way more valuable than even just the inner studio one. We can try to play like normal people, but we all know each other really well. We all have deferences to each other, and we're generally decently nice human beings. You need to go out and play with more wild variety of people and see what that's really like. And that changes kind of the experience, and kind of not just from getting into the game, but just the moment to moment and things you have to worry about. Like, is anybody going to ever heal me? I'm down. Oh God, what's going on here? Like, so that's been really valuable.
The game serves both audiences, right? Like, the game serves people who download it from Game Pass and hit the quick play button and just jump into a game with 3 people they've never met and will probably never see again. But then it also serves the people who play every Tuesday night, because that's the night that they play games with their friends. And like, we're now part of the rotation with Deep Rock and Left 4 Dead and the other kind of games that they like. Are those the types of games you mostly stick to as a studio for quote unquote research, or do you kind of play some of everything? Like, is there anything like any really out of left field game that has like no resemblance to the Anacrusis that you've learned anything valuable from? But you play Double Action Boogaloo a lot.
Yes.
Is that a real game?
Double Action Boogaloo. Your Discord should get a night and play some Double Action Boogaloo. I cannot say that enough. It is a game that is just goofy action hero shooter on the Source engine, so it's free if you have any Source game. But the thing that it does really well is it doesn't reward you for your kill death ratio. It rewards you for style. So it's how you kill people. So you can do John Woo sliding jumps, and there's even doves flying at some points. And like, it's just so good. It's just so dumb. And it's that thing of like, players online just don't want to get all sweaty and be all like military. They want to have fun. They want to have that joy of that kind of goofiness. And so that's definitely something that we lean into. And in fact, the dev of that plays a lot of other games with us now as well. Like, it's kind of the thing of, we always try to find the person who made the mod and get them on our stream. So every Tuesday and Wednesday we stream what we're playing with the community, and we try to get the people who made it so we can ask them questions and kind of dive into it. And especially the early Source ones are almost always of like, well, this is what the engine could do, that's why we did it that way. I'm like, okay, fair. But that is a really good one. We played a lot of horror stuff, which has really kind of helped me inform. Jump scares are stupid in games. The fear of jump scares is amazing. If you are scared of that jump scare coming and you just turn and start running, that is a really good moment. The jump scare itself, maybe not, but that moment, that's really good. And there's a whole bunch of stuff. We'll try almost anything. We were playing. Actually, we went back and played Valhalla. Or Valheim.
Yes. Yeah.
We were playing some Project Zomboid the other day.
We played a bunch of old Left 4 Dead mods, like the Helm's Deep Left 4 Dead mod. We played Warframe, and I think I downloaded Ark, but I don't know if I ever actually played Ark but like all the way up to like stuff like Destiny and Fortnite, just to see what people are doing in games where people play together on the same team.
Chet, the big question. What do you wish you had known before founding and running your own studio?
So there's this really weird thing that happens is we hire a bunch of senior people. We want to all kind of work together and not have this boss on top dictating down. And current me would go back to past me and try to explain there's a time when you need to put your foot down a little bit, and you need to learn how to do that in a way where you're not a jerk. I don't yell. I wish I could yell a lot.
He just cries usually. If he gets really upset, he just bursts into tears.
Yeah, when in doubt, cry a little. Did you try crying? No? All right, try that. But what really happens is, right, so we have these really, really great engineers, and I think Will's seen the sheet of paper for the original creature design. I did a 1-pager. Like, I don't believe in big giant design documents. I believe in you do the core of kind of the idea of it. You put it in the game and you get feedback on it and you iterate on it. And that's how you really get the right thing. But I have like this, say, this is the creatures that we need to put in. So now the engineer jumps to that. And I think they're pretty close to what that original design was, but there's variations of it where this is like, oh, this is actually not as fun as it should be. Crap. Okay. But hey, this person has a really good idea on this. I'm just going to let them run with this. Let's try that versus, hey, no. Here's the reason why. Let's stop everything. Let's sit down and talk about why this is the rule on this one, right? And so there's a lot of rules. Like right now in our weapons, we have weapons in the game where we took this system where there's a bunch of different elements that influence and change the weapons. So there's a bunch of variations. There's, I don't know, like 100 variations of the weapons. But it breaks a cardinal rule of mine of if you can pick something up and nobody else can have that, it needs to be something that you understand what it is that you're picking up so that you don't do the thing where you pick it up and you throw it down because you're like, oh, I don't want that. And then you also need to be able to not be able to pick up another one because you picked up this one. And our weapons break that rule. But they break it where you're making a complex decision in real time and you may throw it back down because you prefer your old one. We're going to change that. We're going to work on it. We wanted to put the weapons in to start testing it and get iteration. But like, that's a good example of like, that's a rule that we should have just been firmer about. But everybody on that team was really excited and they were really just wanting to get them in the game and testing them. And honestly, they're fine that way for now as a test, right?
It's like there's enough of them. It doesn't break anything. I think it doesn't bring anything bad.
But so it's always that hard line of when do I put my foot down and say, no, this is a core element. This is like not a hardcore shooter. We want to have this happiness around it. And when is it wrong? Because sometimes I get it wrong, right? I'm not infallible. I remember when we were originally showing VR back at Valve's days, just for a minute here, let me go back. If you remember the very first time anybody saw the Vive, they had to put a belt on that held a USB adapter on their side. We called it the Full Monty. I remember as we realized that's what we were going to have to do because you had to plug in the controllers. I remember thinking, this is all any reviewer is going to talk about, that we made you put a belt on. It looks like a diaper. This is going to be a disaster.
It was really big and uncomfortable. I didn't remember it. I immediately forgot it within about 10 seconds of putting the headset on.
Exactly. And so there's a bunch of things I'm thinking about, like, because I'm thinking about how to mitigate that and whatever. But like in my head, I'm like, oh my God, we can't do this. This is going to be horrible. Ended up nobody talked about it, right? So there are things that are like that, though, in the game that you got to let go. And so it's learning when to put your foot down and be like, hey, right? Because it's really bad, though, if you don't want to have the, hey, past self, the advice I want to give you is be a big jerk, or like put your foot down, or be that guy on top who knows better than anybody else. Because that's not what it is. It's like, stepping back and making sure and thinking about like, is this one of those paths that we go down that's a bad idea? Because it's often like people are brainstorming, they're coming up with a bunch of cool stuff, and you want to say, oh, we should never do that. That's work. Like there's this thing of work and play, and you never want to cross into work. You don't want to make people doing spreadsheets. You want them having fun and joy. And how do you separate those two and think about those two? Well, it's a really fine line that a lot of even senior developers probably don't think about, because they've never been given this much design control, or they've just never thought about it that way because there's some design document that's thinking about that for them, or they make a game that's more work than play.
Or they're really good at math and they like doing math, and they don't think that doing a bunch of percentages to figure out what the best weapon perk loadout is actually not fun for the vast majority. Anyway.
Yeah. Sorry. So there's a bunch of that. And so it's like, I wish I would have gone back and said, hey, sometimes it is worth sitting everything down and stopping everything for some of these things, because it ends up, we spend a lot of times on things we shouldn't have spent time on, or we tried things. And because part of iteration process is you are going to put things in that you're going to rip back out and change, or you're going to just, they don't work. Like our iteration process we have a holdout mode that's gone through a bunch of radically different iterations. We first kind of stood it up like the Left 4 Dead one, and the Left 4 Dead one was done in 2 weeks or a month. Like it was a super one engineer, one artist, as quick as we can make this thing, let's make it kind of thing. It's fine. It's fun. But hey, that's not right for our game. So what can we do that's different? How can we think about it? We kept going back, and really that drew then inspiration from playing Killing Floor some and how they do it, and with the boss at the end. And so, okay. So like that iteration, that was really good because we just kept throwing stuff out and we weren't precious about it. But every so often during the process, somebody's become precious about something. And maybe even me, of like, that just isn't working, and you got to just put it in the game. You got to iterate on it, and iteration's got to be, hey, I'm willing to pull this out and say that didn't work. I'm willing to revert back, or I'm willing to say, yeah, we got to concentrate on this. And I think now as a studio, we are in a really good spot that we are all focused. We all have the same vision for the game. We're all understanding what we're making and we're executing on it. And that's happening really well, but it took a while to get there. It was a long, long slog. And I mean, some of that's bad leadership by me. I will bite that bullet and say, through various times of the making the game, it's been hard or it's been easy, right? I mean, it's 3 years, not to get weird, but my mom died during the middle of this, right? Like during the pandemic. There was a pandemic during all of this too. Like there was a lot of things happening. We went from a studio that everyone was in the same room, that we would go for design walks and talk about the game during walks, to, hey, I've got to call you on a Zoom call, and all of a sudden it feels super serious and it's super weird and the air is poison and I don't know. It's like, it's weird, right? And so like during those ups and downs, trying to be that kind of a fluid studio, you often have this problem where things do get a little off to the side, and just how you correct that. I think that like realization of that's my job. That's my only job.
And also, like, we did a pretty good job of hiring people with a lot of empathy that are like good at working together. And the downside of that is people don't want to make other people feel bad. So if somebody's worked hard on something and like they clearly have put a lot into it, you don't want to like it takes help. Everybody has to be thoughtful, and some people just don't like being in the situation where they have to give feedback that this wasn't I don't think this is good for the game. Yeah. Right.
I think I think almost every artist should take one programming class so they get some logical thinking and they can have some understanding about that. Not to say they have logical thinking, they do, but you know what I'm saying, of like they can just see the kind of the crispness around that, because that's helpful. And then I think every engineer should take some art classes so they can be in an art critique and understand that you can give negative feedback in a positive way.
Yeah.
And granted, some art critiques aren't that way and they're all just mean and nasty. But like in my creative writing classes and stuff, they're really good about like, hey, this is how I'm going to try to talk about this and really be like, no, this is not the right thing, but I'm not going to beat you up about it. I'm not going to make it personal. And this is something like for me, it's a constant thing to work on. I look to other people. Harvey Smith just had a really good podcast where he talks about like he's had ups and downs in his career, right? But you listen to that, he's never blaming. He's just talking about here's the problem, here's this like how he thought about it, and being open about that and being thoughtful about that. And like I strive to be that way, but I know sometimes I'm not, right? Sometimes I just get excited or whatever and babble comes out of my mouth. Who knows? But it's that weight of that, knowing that, especially when the babble comes out of my mouth and I am the quote unquote boss, I am the boss. Like it's a weird feeling, right? And understanding that has weight to it and how I have to be careful about talking about that. And then, especially then it's bad to Will's point of then if I'm the only negative one, then, oh my God, this is just like, so how do you encourage that? It's not to encourage negative. Yeah. So be a jerk and be negative is the two things that I learned. No. But you have to have a way to be honest with each other in that. And I think, again, the studio's now gotten to the point where the group that's here is like really good about that and really honest about that and being an understanding of what that is. But also that some of that is we have a shared vision of what the game is now in an understandable way, right? You can't say, hey, we're going to make these gun mods and the goal we're going for is they're cool. Right. Almost always when somebody comes up with a new idea, it's my question is, what's the goal? Because that's the goal. We can't know if something's successful or a failure unless we know the goal.
We specifically talked about this the other day. I said, I pitched something. I'll pick on myself because I'm willing to do that. But I said, hey, we need something. We need a monster that chases the survivors. Chet was like, why the hell do we need a monster that chases the survivors? And I said, well, because new players need some sort of pressure that pushes them forward so they don't just get stuck in one particular area. And there's actually two problems there, right? One is that there's no pressure pushing players forward. But the other thing is actually that we have a couple of areas in the early levels of the game where people tend to get twisted around and lost because the path branches out and doesn't show an obvious next direction. So like there's two, like the process of taking the problem and then challenging it until you figure out what the actual problems are and break it down into individual issues, then makes it easier for us to solve, and then lets everybody also contribute to the solve rather than just me saying, hey, we need to have, look, I think we should put a battle royale wall in the back of the level that just is slowly chasing everybody throughout the levels. It's perfect. Solves everything.
Radiation field.
Yeah. Will Smith, battle royale aficionado.
Sure. Yes. It's your claim to fame.
Yes.
Just to backfill just a little bit of context about you talking about, kind of being a constructive jerk or whatever. In the early days when you were setting up the studio, like what was the kind of guiding principle for like, what is the management structure? How much management structure? How flat is it? Like, where is decision-making power concentrated? Like where did you end up with all that stuff? And like how consensus driven was kind of decision making? Yeah, so I hate to say the word flat because that has all these connotations and weight to it. And in fact, at one point, I think it got weaponized internally in a weird way. So I don't like to use that. What I like to say is we like to empower the person closest to the problem to solve and understand the problem. And so that means a lot of the design documents are kind of vague in the sense of like, hey, when you're there, at some point, you need to enter some number in a field. I don't want to dictate that number to you. You probably have a better sense because like, oh, this is a little bit more bouncy than we thought. So I'm going to like make this faster, whatever, right? There's a bunch of nuance around there. And so trying to have those people go to it. I think the idea was that we would create a box of like, hey, we're making this 60s, 70s sci-fi shooter. So here's some of the rules around that. And so like art is like, what does it mean to be a 70s sci-fi shooter? That's kind of vague. So let's just keep talking about it and let's just do some exploration of what that looks like. Let's create mood boards. Let's look at some references, same kind of with the music around it. Let's bring up a bunch of stuff of that was the influence and the thoughts around it. And then you go run. And there's nothing more fun for me as studio head to be surprised by something, be surprised by like a piece of music that just cracks me up, that it's like amazingly perfect for what it is. On episode 3, our sound designer decided to do a very serious, somber, slow song in the finale, which I'm like, oh my God, this is the perfect bad action hero ending kind of song from like perfect. And so it's trying to do that and defining those walls. And I think personally, I can tell where I failed to define those walls or that box clearly is where we got into some trouble. And so I think, I think about like future projects and how I would approach it differently. And it would probably be document more. Because sometimes, especially early on, we would actually do a lot of design, talking as a studio all together and just document kind of the endpoints of it and not
all of it. And that left people coming behind, not understanding quite the reasoning behind some of this, right? So we had kind of come up with these core pillars. Hey, this is what the game is about, and this is how you can cut your teeth onto decisions. But really, you can't create enough pillars for all the design decisions that are going to happen, right? Like the biggest one always is co-op. So does this make players work against each other? Does this mean they're going to fight for something, or that they're going to let someone get harm because they benefit from it? Okay, so that's an easy one. So as you're doing design, you can balance against that. But there's a lot of other minutiae around that probably could have used some more guidance.
Obviously, there's still work to do in the game because you're still in early access. So that, you still have to kind of reach the 1.0 milestone. But beyond that, how do you know when it's time to stop supporting the Anacrusis and start moving on to the next project? Or is there a dividing line there, or is it kind of a situation of balancing both for kind of a long time to come? Like with a game that is kind of always being iterated on, like when is it done? When do you think about something new?
Well, in my head, like, and this is like the perfect, hey, this is how I think about it is, like Left 4 Dead taught me of, if you give people tools and you keep supporting it and making sure that it can run that, the game could go on for decades. Right. I think if it holds up. So, I think we have a season 1 we want to finish. We have the mod tools up and running. What does season 2 look like? What do future updates look like? I think I want to live in this space longer, and there's still some more things I want to do. And there's obviously a lot more story to add. There's a lot more world to build. Like, all of that's still happening. But I think it's always just, I think guided by the community and what the community is saying that they're looking for and what they're excited about and what they're playing and how they engage with it. I don't think you can have a hard and fast answer. It's not a box copy that January 15th is the ship date and it's done and it's out and we're never going to see it again. So, I think
multiplayer games don't work that way, right?
Yeah.
Like multiplayer games last as long as people play them.
But also the fun thing is, so originally we knew we were always going to launch rough, right? That was kind of the okay thing. The reality is, if you want to get real feedback at the core level on some systems, some things have to be a little rough. And the whole idea is we would just keep grinding out and keep updating it so that when people look back 6 months, a year later, they'd be like, oh my God, there's so much in this game. This game is so great. And I jokingly called it the Rainbow Six Siege method of development. That had a very rocky start. And then one day people were like, this is a really good game. We really like this, right? And I think like that's where the stride we are now at. And so then it becomes okay, what more do people want? Like Versus is a big thing so that we can have the competitive side, but it's the fun competitive side, because Versus isn't a sport. It's a chance to be a jerk. Will has a phrase, it's sanctioned griefing, which is a good way to think about it. Like, we want to bring that there. And then, how long does that extend the life of the game or whatever? And so for us, it's head down grinding on making sure we're fixing in things. What are we happy with? We know what our goals are. We know what we're working for. And then the amount of content that goes in is the question. And then, I think we still have some specials we want to put in so that we have something more for versus mode. And so it's for the foreseeable future. This is what we're working on and having fun doing. So,
any tips for other developers working in this ongoing kind of iterative space with supporting a live game or an early access game, in terms of, specifically, I'm thinking about, like lifting awareness with free weekends and sales, like how to strategize, like when to do things like that and how to do them, and like community. I mean, you've touched on Discord, like you've got communication with your community, but kind of like any tips around like, hey, kind of boosting your profile on a regular basis.
Start your Discord as soon as you can. And then who knows? It changes every week. Like, Twitter is a good example of, I don't think Twitter does anything for our game. I think what it does is it informs people who will then go do things for our game. So I guess it does do something for our game, but it's just not directly. But like streamers, sure, but everyone's kind of caught on to that. So the competition for streamers is really high. And so, what does that look like? So, like for me, I just look at who's playing things I like, or who's playing, if they're not playing our game, if are they playing something that I like, and then I'll just ping them and be like, hey, you want to play our game together sometime, right? And we actually had a streamer who was playing some Left 4 Dead one day and some Back 4 Blood, and she just mentioned on stream, she's like, oh, I'd like to try the Anacrusis someday. Someone told me, so I pinged her and I'm like, hey, do you want to play? And so then we played one week, and then the next week when we played, we actually went into the workshop and we made her a version of her dog as a charm for her gun that she could put on. And so the gun charm of the husky is hers, Hannah's dog. And just have fun like that, like embrace that part of the community, and listen to the community in the ways that they're talking about it and how they're finding out about games. But more and more, I think with the big outlets not being what they were, and streaming being so competitive, there's this real word of mouth thing that happens that is hard to nail down, that I think we are in the throes of right now with the Anacrusis. Like we have a lot of traction now. We're getting a lot of coverage. We're getting a lot of players coming in and discovering the game. Nobody knows your game. That's true. Like, just, you cannot say it enough. Nobody knows your game. Nobody knows your game's out. Nobody knows what you're talking about. Like, you can't talk about it enough, but where you talk about it more, originally we were hoping to go to PAX East is where we were going to announce our game. And we were going to get it by letting people go hands-on and have some fun playing it, and as a way to start building the community around it. And then the little pandemic came and canceled that idea. So we did E3. Our trailer at E3 was a bit rough. I thought it felt stiff. That helped and didn't help. The VGAs. Jeff Keighley gets a lot of crap from people, but Jeff Keighley actually cares about games and cares about indies a ton. If you have something interesting and exciting, he is more than willing to show that trailer and promote it and give you a spot and do that. Like, people try to tell me like, oh, it costs $250,000 to get on the VGAs. No, it doesn't. If you're an indie developer working, Jeff will put you on there if you've got something that's good to show.
That he's stoked about.
Yeah, he is really good about that. So it's just, it's looking for like-minded people and talking with them, spending time making that investment. And then where you make that, I'll go here. I'll use an example that's not us. Slay the Spire. Good game. I play it way too much. I got like 4,000 hours in it, but, it took off because like a Chinese streamer found it one day and started playing it. And then everyone else started watching that and started climbing up the charts. Like, it's a who knows some days, right? I mean, you could go with a publisher and then he's going to spend money and they're going to buy ads on PC Gamer or whatever. Sure. But outside of that, it really is just keep doing the work, keep promoting it, keep talking to people, keep working with people. And then one of those hits.
Well, and there's nobody that's too small. Like, if you have a streamer that loves your game and they have 15 people watching them or 5, like, spend time. Like the path on that is like the rising tide lifts all ships.
Yes.
Right. So yeah.
You never know, like one of those 15 viewers might know some other medium-sized streamer and then they start playing it. And I mean, like this game Goose Goose Duck that's like 2 years old just like exploded because a member of BTS started streaming it randomly.
Exactly.
And like, the Among Us story is well known. That game was years old by the time, like
Rocket League. Rocket League's the second rev of that game, right? Like,
right.
Yeah, but that's part of the job, I think, is what Chet's trying to say. Is like like the job is not just making the game. The job is also you got to tell people about your game. I look at like what Megan Fox did with Skatebird and how like people became aware of that because there were just a buttload of good bird gifs on Twitter every day. Like you just got to figure out your thing and lean into it and make a game that's different than what other people are making.
Yeah, and that's actually the fun part of the workshop, because then we get to. Somebody made a mod the other day where Lance just piggybacks rides whatever character you are. Like, we would never make that. That is just stupid.
It's a terrible idea. It's amazing though.
Yeah. So, but posting pictures of that, all of a sudden people are like, wait, what? What is your game? Let me check this out. Right. And so you got to do the work. You got to keep it's a grind though, right? Like, and I think grind sounds negative. I don't mean grind negative. Thankfully, we made a game that's fun to play. And so when I play it with streamers, I'm still having fun and still laughing and still seeing things I've never seen before. But it's just like you got to just keep putting in the work. You got to keep updating it. You got to keep being out there and promoting it and talking with people and having fun with it. And then, hopefully it hits.
Interesting times to be a game developer, it seems.
This would have been a lot easier 10 years ago, I think.
Well, there's a lot of content out there. There is just so much content out there. And I think it's easy to get people to say yes in the sense that they'll try it, but to stick with it is hard. And it's so easy to say no. Like I was watching the TV show Slow Horses on Apple TV. It's a fine series. And I'm watching it. And then all of a sudden the lead actor makes a lot of noise while eating. And I turned it off because I'm like, I like Gary Oldman, but I really don't like eating noises. It really just something that drives me nuts. Maybe I'll go back to the show, but also there's like 50 other shows I could watch. So maybe I won't go back to the show. Maybe that killed it. Like maybe we have something that's like Gary Oldman eating in our game and we just don't know it. Like, I don't know. It's just really easy to get no's out of people because there's so much other alternative. Essentially, everybody right now is cursed with the thing that every Valve employee knows. When you're at Valve and you have a Valve account, you just play every single game that comes out on Steam. It's really easy to say no and bounce off of something. And so developers, you've really got to think like, how do we get people to just be sticky? Because you've got Game Pass out there competing for people's time. You have Netflix, you have Apple streaming, you have like everything's competing for people's time. So how do you get sticky with that? And for me, the reason why I make co-op games is because it connects people together in a way that no other medium does. It sounds highfalutin and weird, but I truly believe like there's a moment you have of a shared experience with other people playing games that only the real world interaction you have with people replicates it, right? That it's that experience of having that. And to me, that is like so powerful and so great that if you could get people to have that experience where it's just not your friends playing the game, but you meet some stranger playing Anacrusis and you become friends with them, like that is the thing, then that is the other medium I can beat. I can beat Netflix because you can't do that with Netflix, right? You can't do that with a single player game. So that's the space that we can play in and that we've got to make sure that we're doing, that we can really lean into. And so we've got to do that. And that's our job, right? And to bring that. And so it's just a lot of competition out there, man.
Do you have any idea how many times I heard about Slow Horses chewing in Teams? It's been a lot.
It's a good example, though.
It's been a lot.
I resist the urge to ask about you guys being a Microsoft shop.
Look, they let us add our own. You can pick an emoji from the list of all emoji, except for a couple of ones that they deem offensive, rather than just the 5 that they limited to for reactions.
Okay, but that's poor game design. Because before I knew when someone gave me thumbs up or heart, I understood what the reaction was. But now if somebody puts pizza after a post, I don't know what that means.
I just put something after one of your posts. You know what that means?
I put broccoli a lot.
Boo.
I put a lot of broccoli. I don't know. I like broccoli.
You're vegetarian, so that means you like that. That makes sense. That reads.
So, I see a pizza emoji. I assume that person is ready to party.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, there you go. I guess open to interpretation. Yeah. Finally, we have the complex swath of choices that we've always needed.
Look. What you got before, you got thumbs up, heart, smile, and surprise. You can't express, I think this is a bad idea with any of those, which is an important, maybe that's a part of it anyway. Maybe it's Teams' fault.
Petition Microsoft to put a Gary Oldman eating emoji in there and everything.
Oh. There you go.
Chad, thank you for stopping by. Will, also thank you. Been trying to get you on the podcast for ages.
Hey, it's been great to be here, Brad. I'm a big fan. Listen to the show every week. Really love your work for a long time.
It was getting really dull talking to myself every week for the last 3 years. So
Well, I'm just here to keep Chet in line, it turns out. But he did great this week. And I guess, Oh, go ahead. Do you have stuff to plug, Chet? We usually do plugs.
Oh, man.
I can plug it too after we let you go.
I've got my stream. I'm a big streamer now. So Anacrusis is on Steam. It's on Xbox. Hey, guess what? Both have return policies if you don't like it. So you can give it a try. But I think you'll like it.
It's on sale. If you're listening now, it's on sale.
Join our Discord, discord.gg/Stray Bombay. That's discord.gg/Stray Bombay. But no, seriously, it's a fun community where we play a whole bunch of games, not just our game. But it's a really good place if you are playing our game to learn about it and dig in on it. And feel free to give us feedback on that. I don't. So it's weird because I walked into this with this weird feeling of like, I hear your listeners' questions and I hear like everything around it. And I think of like that we're talking to a group of people out there that I can envision more than I normally can when I talk to two people on a Zoom call. And it's a crowd that I like. And I'm trying to be like, wow, would they be interested in this? I'm like, or is this just super boring? Should I say something really crazy about Will? I got a bunch of secrets now. Could just unleash.
Could you leave us with one if you want?
Will knows I'll just go into dad jokes. But
yeah, it's terrible. Don't encourage him.
I wanted to make sure, like I told Will and Brad, that like, let's be honest, we can talk about things. I mean, we're a small studio. It's rough, right? It's hard. Definitely we've made mistakes along the way, but I think where we are now, like I seriously, it sounds like a cliche, but I am more excited than ever for where we are on the Anacrusis in particular, and in the studio and the fun that we're having. And that every day, everybody in the studio, we actually start with just excitedly chatting about what's going on in the world and ourselves. And one of our employees bought a house just recently and scaring her off on all the horrible things that happens when you own a house. But this has been really fun. And it's like, that captures kind of where the Anacrusis is, of like the fun that it's having and people going back to it. And I'm going to play it tonight with some friends that I made on Discord. So yeah, check it out. Let us know. And yeah, let me know if I was boring in this. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't travel back in time.
You've achieved the guest mantle now. So now we have to bring you onto the Discord so you can ask them yourself.
I can come back in a year and we can talk about the second year update, and I could be better.
Well, hold on. The only time we've done that so far is with Kishore, and that was for the Rona. So as long as you don't kill a few million people, you're welcome back next year, Chet. And that'll wrap it up for us this week. Thanks to Chet for coming by.
Yeah. Absolutely. I didn't get into it on there, but big fan of Chet from way back.
Yeah.
Perhaps in the Old Man Murray days, one might say. So
yeah, I remember reading Old Man Murray and thinking, oh man, people on the internet are really angry all the time. And then they just kept getting angrier and angrier as time went on. Who knew?
Parody somehow became reality.
Yeah. It's people read Old Man Murray now and don't realize that it was a parody site back then. But more than I'd like to thank Chet, I'd like to thank our patrons, because this is a listener-sponsored show. We wouldn't be here without you all.
It is true.
So as always, if you would like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/techpod. Again, that's patreon.com/techpod. Brad, I did some experimenting with Ghost, by the way, over the break.
Oh?
Yes.
Ghost seems cool. Is Ghost open source?
Ghost is, I believe, is Ghost open source? It might be.
I can tell you Ghost seems pretty open in general, I guess I would say.
I mean, I was experimenting with a hosted free trial of Ghost to see if I wanted to move my shitty blog to it. I don't think I do, but I do think that if people were interested and wanted to not be part of the Patreon community, it would be very easy for us to spin up a parallel Patreon that has exactly the same rewards and benefits using Ghost, if that is a thing that people would be interested in.
Yeah, I've had my eye on Ghost. I looked at it before we launched Nextlander. It's kind of a more open, somewhat more, I don't know, egalitarian, you might say, Patreon competitor.
They just charge you for credit card processing fees, and they don't take a percentage.
Yes,
I like that a lot. It turns out
they are quite a bit friendlier to creators, you might say, and also a publishing platform as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
So if people are interested in that, please let us know in the Discord, because it's something we're open to. If people don't like Patreon for whatever reason,
hey, alternatives are good.
Yeah. But as always, we would like to thank our executive producer tier patrons, including Nick Johnston, Paddle Creek Games makers of Fractured Veil, Andrew Slosky, Octothorpe Bunny Crimes brought to +8 pretending to be a duck. This is a bit from my Twitch Discord now.
Okay. I didn't know the names could be that long.
We've gone through the looking glass here. Just Wedge, Joel Krauske, Twinkle Twinkie, and James Kamek. Thank you all so much. We appreciate everybody who supports the TechPod Patreon.
Sure do.
And I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. If you didn't, please let us know in the Discord. We do appreciate that feedback. And, I'm going to start doing something that our friend Rob Zachney over at, what is it, Civilized Age does at the end. He says, if you liked the podcast, consider leaving a review, but especially if you listen to it on iTunes, because it turns out that's the only place that podcast reviews really matter. So, if you want to leave a review, reviews are one of the ways that help new people find our podcast, and we do really appreciate those.
Algorithms, you got to make them work for you.
Yeah, it's like Alexander Hamilton said, algorithms, you got to make them work for you.
Of course he did.
See y'all next week.